The sound of the slap echoed louder than the sirens cutting through the humid Houston air. It wasn't just a hit. It was a statement. Officer Rachel Bennett thought she had just put another thug in his place, asserting her dominance on the side of a lonely highway. She grinned as she cuffed him, unaware that the man whose face she just bruised wasn't a criminal. He was the one man who held the power to destroy her entire life. I'm telling you the story of how a split-second decision fueled by hate led to the most satisfying, brutal karma you'll ever hear. Buckle up. The heat coming off the asphalt on Interstate 10 was enough to distort the air, shimmering in waves that made the horizon look like a mirage. It was a stifling summer afternoon, where patience wore thin and tempers snapped like dry twigs. Inside Patrol Unit 4 Alpha, the air conditioning was blasting, but it did little to cool the mood of Officer Rachel Bennett. Rachel was 34, with a reputation that preceded her. To her friends, she was tough but fair. To the residents of the Southwest District, she was a nightmare with a badge. She tapped her fingers rhythmically against the steering wheel, her eyes scanning the road with a predatory gaze. Beside her sat Officer Kyle Patterson, a rookie with only 6 months on the force. Kyle was soft-spoken, trying too hard to fit in, and terrified of contradicting his senior partner. "Look at this guy," Rachel muttered, narrowing her eyes. Up ahead, a charcoal gray sedan was cruising in the right lane. It was driving exactly at the speed limit. The car was clean, a late-model Volvo, unassuming but respectable. "He's doing the limit, Rach," Kyle said, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. "Actually, he's driving perfectly." "That's the tell, Kyle," she scoffed, accelerating the cruiser until they were riding the Volvo's bumper. "Nobody drives exactly the limit unless they're hiding something. He's running drugs or he's got warrants. Run the plate." Kyle sighed, typing the license plate number into the onboard computer. The plate came back clean, registered to a Derrick Coleman. No warrants. Insurance was active. "Coleman?" Rachel repeated, tasting the name with disdain. "Sounds foreign. Bet you he doesn't have a valid U.S. license on him." She flipped the lights. The red and blue strobe reflected off the Volvo's rear window. The driver didn't panic. He didn't swerve. He simply signaled right and pulled over onto the gravel shoulder with practiced ease. Rachel slammed the cruiser into park before the wheels had fully stopped. "Watch me work, rookie." "Rach, really? Maybe we just give a warning," Kyle suggested weakly. "For what? I don't even know what we pulled him over for," Kyle admitted. "Broken tail light," she lied smoothly, unbuckling her seatbelt. "Or at least it will be when I'm done with it." Rachel adjusted her belt, resting her hand near her holster, and marched toward the driver's side. The window of the Volvo rolled down slowly. The man inside was black, in his mid-40s, wearing a crisp, expensive navy suit. He wore wire-rimmed glasses and had the calm demeanor of a man who had played this game before. He kept his hands visible on the steering wheel, fingers spread. "License and registration," Rachel barked, skipping the greeting. Derrick Coleman turned his head slowly to face her. His expression was unreadable, almost bored. "Good afternoon, officer. May I ask the reason for the stop?" "I asked for your license and registration," she snapped, leaning closer to the window. "Do you have a hearing problem?" "I heard you perfectly," Derrick replied, his voice a deep baritone, steady and controlled. "I'm informing you that I'm reaching into my jacket pocket for my wallet." "Don't tell me what to do, just get it." As Derrick moved his hand slowly, Rachel's eyes darted around the car interior. No drugs, no weapons, just a leather briefcase on the passenger seat and a suit jacket hanging in the back. It infuriated her. He was too clean, too calm. He didn't look afraid of her, and that was an insult she couldn't abide. Derrick handed over his license. Rachel snatched it, looking at the photo and then at him. "Derrick Coleman," she read aloud, butchering the pronunciation intentionally. "What kind of name is that? You're not from around here, boy." Derrick's jaw tightened slightly, the first sign of irritation. "I was born in Houston, officer. My family is Nigerian. Is that relevant to the traffic violation?" "Don't get smart with me," she hissed. "Step out of the car." "For a traffic stop?" Derrick asked, raising an eyebrow. "Am I under arrest?" "I said step out of the car," Rachel shouted, her hand dropping to her taser. Kyle Patterson had walked up to the passenger side, looking nervous. "Rach, maybe we just write the ticket and go." "Shut up, Patterson," she yelled over the roof of the car. She turned back to Derrick. "Last warning, get out or I drag you out." Derrick sighed, the sound of a man dealing with an unruly child rather than a law enforcement officer. He unbuckled his seatbelt and opened the door. He stood up, towering over her. He was 6'2", broad-shouldered but lean. He smoothed his suit jacket, maintaining absolute composure. "Turn around, hands on the hood," she ordered. Derrick complied. "Officer, I feel obligated to tell you that this is a mistake. You are escalating a situation that does not exist. You resisting?" Rachel stepped in close, pressing her body against his back to frisk him, doing it roughly, jamming her hands into his pockets. "I'm standing perfectly still," Derrick said. "Stop moving," she screamed, though he hadn't moved an inch. Then it happened. Whether it was the heat, her own insecurity, or the sheer audacity of this man's calmness, Rachel snapped. She grabbed Derrick's wrist and twisted it behind his back violently. Derrick winced, his shoulder popping. "Officer, that is unnecessary." "Shut your mouth," Rachel roared. She spun him around and with the heel of her open palm struck him hard across the jaw. The sound was sickening. Derrick's head snapped to the side. His glasses flew off, skittering across the gravel. A trickle of blood appeared at the corner of his lip. Kyle Patterson gasped. "Rach, what the hell?" Derrick didn't fight back. He didn't swing. He slowly turned his head back to face her. He spat a little blood onto the asphalt and looked her dead in the eyes. The look wasn't fear. It was pity. "That," Derrick said quietly, "was the last mistake you will ever make in this uniform." "You threatening me?" Rachel's face turned crimson. She unhooked her handcuffs. "That's it? Assault on an officer, resisting arrest? You're done." She slammed him against the hood, cuffing him tight enough to cut off circulation. As she shoved him toward the patrol car, Derrick didn't say another word. He just watched her, memorizing her badge number. Bennett, 559 or 20. The ride to the central precinct was suffocatingly silent. Derrick sat in the back, his hands numb from the tight cuffs, staring out the window with a stoic intensity. In the front seat, the dynamic had shifted. Kyle Patterson was driving, his knuckles white on the wheel. He kept glancing in the rearview mirror, terrified. "Rach, you hit him," Kyle whispered. "He wasn't doing anything." "He lunged at me," Rachel said loudly, ensuring the dashcam audio, if it was even on, picked up her narrative. "You saw it, Patterson. He made a move from my belt. I acted in self-defense. I was on the other side of the car, Rach. I didn't see him reach." "You saw what I told you." "You saw," she hissed, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Unless you want to be back on foot patrol in the projects for the rest of your short career, you back your partner. That's the code. We are the blue line. We don't rat." Kyle swallowed hard and said nothing. He was young with a pregnant wife at home. He needed this job. When they arrived at the station, Rachel made a show of it. She dragged Derrick out of the car, parading him through the back entrance where the booking desk was. The station was busy. Phones were ringing. Other officers were processing drunks and petty thieves. "What do we have here, Bennett?" The desk sergeant, a gruff man named Kowalski, didn't even look up from his paperwork. "Assault on a police officer, resisting arrest, disorderly conduct." Rachel rattled off the charges with practiced ease. "And check him for substances. He's acting erratic, probably on something synthetic." Derrick stood there, his suit rumpled, his lips swelling and turning a dark purple. He waited until Kowalski finally looked up. "Name?" Kowalski asked. "Derrick Coleman," Derrick said. "I would like to make my phone call immediately." "You'll get your call when we process you," Rachel interrupted, shoving him toward the holding bench. "Sit down." Derrick sat. He watched the room. He saw the peeling paint on the walls, the overworked officers, the culture of indifference. He watched Rachel laughing with another officer by the coffee machine, acting out a pantomime of the arrest, clearly mocking him. Time passed. Suddenly, the heavy double doors at the front of the precinct burst open. The room went quiet. It wasn't usual for the front doors to open with such force. Walking in was a woman in a sharp gray pantsuit trailing a frantic-looking lieutenant, but behind them was the person who made the room freeze. It was Chief of Police Edward Thompson. Thompson was a legend in the department, old school, tough, but known for being politically savvy. He never came down to the booking floor. Never. "Attention on deck!" Kowalski shouted. Every officer in the room snapped to attention. Rachel straightened up, wiping the smile off her face. She puffed out her chest, proud to be seen by the chief. Maybe he was here to commend her for a bust. Chief Thompson didn't look at the officers. He was scanning the room, his face pale, sweat beading on his forehead. His eyes landed on the holding bench. on Derrick. Thompson rushed forward, bypassing the lieutenant, bypassing Rachel. He walked straight to the handcuffed man on the bench. "Mr. Director," Thompson said, his voice trembling slightly. "My God, I'm so sorry." The room went dead silent. You could hear the hum of the vending machine. Rachel blinked. "Director." Derrick looked up at the chief. "Hello, Edward. It's been a long time." "Get those cuffs off him now," Thompson screamed, turning to Kowalski. Kowalski scrambled over the desk, keys fumbling in his hand. He unlocked Derrick's cuffs. Derrick stood up, rubbing his raw wrists. He adjusted his suit jacket, then reached into his inner pocket, the same pocket Rachel had screamed at him about earlier. He pulled out a leather wallet, flipped it open, and held it up for the room to see. It wasn't a driver's license. It was a gold shield, a federal badge, but not just any badge. "For those who don't know me," Derrick said, his voice projecting clearly across the room without shouting. "My name is Derrick Coleman. I'm the newly appointed Executive Director of the Independent Police Oversight Board, Federal Division. As of this morning, I have been granted full subpoena power over this precinct by the Department of Justice." Rachel felt the blood drain from her face. Her knees actually buckled and she had to grab the counter to stay upright. The Oversight Board, the people who investigated dirty cops, the people who fired chiefs. Derrick walked slowly toward Rachel. The room parted for him like the Red Sea. He stopped 2 feet from her. He looked at her badge, then up at her terrified eyes. "Officer Bennett," Derrick said softly, "you mentioned earlier that I was done. I believe you may have confused your future with mine." "I didn't know," Rachel stammered, her voice a squeak. "Sir, you didn't identify yourself. I followed protocol." "Protocol?" Derrick touched his swollen lip. "Is hitting a restrained suspect in the face protocol, Officer Bennett? Is falsifying the reason for a stop protocol?" He turned to the chief. "Edward, I want the dashcam footage from Unit 4 Alpha secured immediately. If a single second of it is deleted or corrupted, I will indict every person in this chain of command for obstruction of justice. Do I make myself clear?" "Crystal clear, sir," Chief Thompson said, glaring at Rachel with pure hatred. "Patterson, give me the keys to the unit now." Kyle Patterson ran over, handing the keys to the chief, shaking like a leaf. Derrick turned his gaze to Kyle. "And you, Officer Patterson, is it?" "Yes, sir," Kyle whispered. "You have a choice to make, son," Derrick said, his eyes boring into the rookie's soul. "You can be a witness or you can be a co-defendant. But know this, I am not looking for an apology. I am looking for the cancer in this department, and I just found a tumor." Derrick turned back to Rachel. She was trembling, tears of panic forming in her eyes. "You wanted a war, Officer Bennett," Derrick said, leaning in close. "You just declared it on the United States government." Rachel Bennett sat in her living room, the blinds drawn tight against the afternoon sun. It had been a few days since the incident at the precinct. She was technically on administrative leave pending investigation, which in the Houston PD usually meant a paid vacation while the union smoothed things over. But this felt different. The silence from her usual allies was deafening. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was Frank Moretti, the union representative for the precinct. Moretti was a massive man, a former beat cop who had traded his baton for a briefcase and a talent for burying scandals. He was the only person answering her calls. "Rach, don't say a word," Moretti's voice crackled through the speaker. "I'm outside. Open the door." Rachel let him in. Moretti looked tired. He didn't take off his coat. "Tell me you didn't talk to Internal Affairs yet," Moretti said, pacing the small living room. "I didn't talk to anyone, Frank. But you saw what happened. That guy, Coleman, he ambushed me. He didn't identify himself as a federal agent. That's entrapment or something, right?" Moretti stopped pacing and looked at her like she was an idiot. "He didn't have to identify himself, Rach. He was a civilian during a traffic stop. The law doesn't change just because he has a bigger badge than you. The problem is the dashcam. The dashcam only catches what's in front of the car. It didn't see me hit him. We were on the side. It's my word against his, and Patterson saw what I told him to see." Moretti rubbed his temples. "That's what I'm here about. Kyle Patterson. The kid is shaking. I saw him in the locker room this morning. He looks like he's about to vomit up his own liver. If Internal Affairs gets him in a room for 10 minutes, he's going to fold." Rachel's eyes narrowed. The fear in her chest hardened into something cold and sharp. "He won't fold. I'll make sure of it." Don't do anything stupid, Rach, Moretti warned. Coleman isn't just some guy. He's the director of the oversight board. He has the power to audit the entire precinct. The chief is terrified. If you intimidate a witness, I can't save you. I'm not going to intimidate him, Rachel lied, walking to the window and peering through the slats. I'm just going to remind him of his obligations. Later that night, the rain began to fall, washing the grime off the city streets but doing nothing to cleanse the tension hanging over the Patterson household. Kyle Patterson was sitting at his kitchen table, staring at a plate of cold lasagna. His wife, Megan, was in the other room, 7 months pregnant, folding baby clothes. Every time a car drove past the house, Kyle flinched. A knock at the door made him jump so hard his chair screeched against the floor. "Kyle, who is it?" Megan called out. "Stay there, honey. It's probably just a delivery." Kyle walked to the door, his heart hammering against his ribs. He peered through the peephole. It was Rachel. She was wearing a hoodie, civilian clothes, standing in the rain. He opened the door a crack. "Rach, you're not supposed to be here. We're not allowed to communicate during an investigation." "Open the door, Kyle," she said, her voice low. She pushed her way inside before he could stop her. She dripped water onto the entryway rug, smelling of rain and stale cigarettes. "You need to leave," Kyle whispered, glancing back toward the living room where his wife was. "If they find out you're here, they won't find out unless you tell them," Rachel said, stepping closer. She invaded his personal space, just like she had done to Derrick Coleman. "I heard you're nervous, Kyle. I heard you're thinking about telling stories to the feds." "I'm going to tell the truth, Rach," Kyle hissed. "You broke his jaw for nothing. He's the director of the board. My career's over if I lie." Rachel laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Your career's over if you rat. You think Coleman cares about you? You're just collateral damage to him, but the department we remember. You rat on a partner and backup comes a little slower. Next time you call for help, you file for overtime and the paperwork gets lost. You want a transfer? Denied." She looked past him toward the living room door. "And you've got a kid coming, right? Diapers are expensive. Megan needs good health insurance. It would be a shame if you lost your pension before you even earned it because you couldn't stick to the story." Kyle went pale. "Are you threatening my family?" "I'm giving you financial advice," Rachel said, her eyes dead. "Here's the story." He reached for his waistband. "I perceived a threat. I neutralized it. You were on the passenger side. Your view was obstructed, but you heard me shout 'gun' before I struck him. That's it. That's the truth." She patted him on the cheek hard enough to sting. "Don't be a hero, Kyle. Heroes get buried, cops get paid." She turned and walked out into the rain, leaving the door unlatched. Kyle stood there, trembling, feeling the weight of the blue wall crushing the air out of his lungs. He closed the door and locked it, sliding down to sit on the floor, putting his head in his hands. The offices of the Independent Police Oversight Board looked nothing like a police station. Located in a glass and steel high-rise downtown, the office was silent, air-conditioned, and smelled of lemon polish and expensive coffee. Derrick Coleman sat at the head of a long mahogany conference table. His jaw was wired shut on one side, a clean white bandage taping it in place. He sipped a protein shake through a straw, his eyes fixed on the large monitor on the wall. Beside him sat Special Agent Nathan Brooks, FBI liaison, and a team of forensic audio specialists. "Play it again," Derrick mumbled, the pain in his jaw flaring with every word. On the screen, the dashcam footage from Unit 4 Alpha played. It showed the Volvo pulling over. It showed Rachel marching up. It showed Derrick getting out. But because the car was angled, the actual strike was obscured by Derrick's body. The audio, however, was crisp. "Shut your mouth! Crack! Officer, that is unnecessary." "She claims you reached for a weapon," Agent Brooks said, reading from the preliminary report filed by Rachel's union lawyer. "They are going to argue furtive movement. Without a clear visual of your hands at the moment of impact, a jury might hesitate. Cops get the benefit of the doubt, Derrick. You know that better than anyone." Derrick tapped the table with a pen. "I don't need a jury yet. I need the department to turn on itself. What about the rookie, Patterson? He's scheduled for an interview later today." Brooks said, "But the word is, he's lawyered up, union appointed. He's going to parrot her narrative." Derrick closed his eyes. He remembered the look on Kyle Patterson's face on the highway. Fear not of Derrick, but of Rachel. "Bring him in," Derrick said, "but not to the interrogation room. Bring him here to the conference room. Give him a coffee. I want to talk to him man to man, not prosecutor to suspect." Later that day, Kyle Patterson was ushered into the room. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His suit was ill-fitting, and he kept wringing his hands. A union lawyer, a sharp-faced woman named Natalie Quinn, sat next to him, ready to intercept any question. "Officer Patterson," Derrick said, remaining seated, "thank you for coming. I'm advised to tell you that my client has prepared a statement." Natalie Quinn interrupted immediately. "He will read the statement, and we will be answering no further questions at this time." Derrick ignored her. He looked directly at Kyle. "How is Megan? She's due soon, isn't she?" Kyle blinked, startled. "How did you know?" "I do my homework, Kyle. Boy or girl?" "Girl," Kyle whispered. "Client instructions, Mr. Director," Natalie snapped. "Stick to the incident." Derrick stood up slowly, wincing as he adjusted his jaw. He walked around the table. "Kyle, look at me. Look at my face." Kyle looked up. He saw the bruising, the swelling, the wires holding the man's jaw together. "I have a daughter, too," Derrick said softly. "She's 6. When I go home tonight, I have to explain to her why Daddy can't read her a bedtime story because he can't speak clearly. I have to explain why a police officer, someone I taught her to trust, did this to me." Kyle looked down at his shoes. "I know she came to your house." Derrick dropped the bomb casually. Natalie stiffened. "Objection. That is speculation." "Is it?" Derrick pressed a button on a remote. The screen on the wall changed. It wasn't dashcam footage. It was grainy black and white footage from a neighbor's Ring doorbell camera across the street from Kyle's house. It showed Rachel Bennett standing on Kyle's porch, pushing her way inside. "She was inside for a while," Derrick recited. "That is witness tampering, Kyle. That is a federal crime. If you lie to me today to protect her, you become an accessory to that crime. You will go to prison. You will miss your daughter's birth. You will miss her first steps. And for what? For Rachel Bennett." Kyle began to shake. Tears welled up in his eyes. "Kyle, don't say anything," Natalie warned, but her voice lacked confidence now. "She told me," Kyle's voice cracked. "She told me to say I heard her yell gun." "Did she yell gun?" Derrick asked gently. "No," Kyle sobbed. "No, she didn't. You were calm. You were perfect. She just snapped." "Kyle!" Natalie shouted. "Shut up!" Kyle yelled at his lawyer, standing up. "I'm not going to jail for her. She hit him. She twisted his arm and she hit him in the face and laughed about it. She said nobody would believe him because of who he is." Derrick nodded slowly to Agent Brooks. "Get that on the record. Full deposition now." While Kyle was being ushered into the next room to give his sworn statement, Derrick's phone rang. It was a contact in the media. "Derrick, you need to see Channel 5, the voice said. "Right now." Derrick grabbed the remote and switched the input to the local news. There was Rachel Bennett. She wasn't hiding. She was giving an exclusive interview on her front lawn, surrounded by microphones. She was crying, but it looked rehearsed. "I am the victim of a political witch hunt," Rachel sobbed into the cameras. "This man, this bureaucrat, he hates the police. He has a history of anti-police rhetoric. He provoked me. He used racial slurs against me. And now, because he has powerful friends in Washington, he's trying to ruin my life. I am a single woman in a dangerous job, and I defended myself against an aggressive man, and now I'm being crucified for it." The headline on the bottom of the screen read, "Cop claims reverse racism in traffic stop assault." Agent Brooks stared at the screen, stunned. "She's doubling down. She's trying to win in the court of public opinion before we can indict her." Derrick watched Rachel's performance. He saw the way she manipulated the narrative, playing the victim, weaponizing her tears. It was masterful. It was also suicide. "She just claimed I used racial slurs," Derrick said, his voice dangerously low. "It's her word against yours," Brooks noted. "The audio on the dashcam outside isn't perfect. It's windy." "She forgot one thing," Derrick said, a cold smile touching his lips. "What?" "The cruiser she drives, Unit 4 Alpha. It's a 2024 model. I authorized the budget for those cars months ago. I insisted on a specific upgrade package for the new fleet, internal cabin recording with a buffer. It records audio inside the car even when the lights are off to prevent prisoner abuse." Derrick typed in his administrative override code into the cloud server for the Houston PD fleet. He pulled up the file for Unit 4 Alpha recorded immediately after the arrest when Rachel and Kyle were driving him to the station. He clicked play. Rachel's voice filled the conference room, crystal clear high-definition audio. He lunged at me. "You saw it, Patterson. He made a move for my belt. I acted in self-defense. I was on the other side of the car, Rach. I didn't see him reach. You saw what I told you saw. Unless you want to be back on foot patrol in the projects. We are the blue line. We don't rat. And look at him. Arrogant prick, thinking a suit makes him one of us. I bet he stole that car." The room went silent. It was a smoking gun. It was conspiracy, obstruction of justice, falsification of police reports, and explicit bias, all captured in her own voice. Derrick looked at the TV screen where Rachel was still crying about being a victim. "Let her finish her interview," Derrick said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. "Let her dig the hole a little deeper, then release the tape." "You want to release it to the press?" Brooks asked. "No," Derrick said. "I want to play it for her in the courtroom. But first, get a warrant. We're not asking for a suspension anymore. I want her in handcuffs by dinner time." Rachel Bennett sat in the back of the Thin Blue Line Tavern, a dive known for being a safe haven for off-duty cops. It was crowded, noisy, and for the first time in days, Rachel felt like she was winning. The TV above the bar was replaying her interview on a loop. The chyron on the screen read, "Officer stands ground against federal overreach." "You told him, Rach," a burly officer from the 19th District shouted, raising a beer. "Don't let those suits push you around." Rachel smiled, taking a sip of her drink. She checked her phone. Her GoFundMe page, set up by a sympathetic relative, had raised a lot of money quickly. The comments were full of support from people who didn't know Derrick Coleman, didn't know the law, and certainly didn't know the truth. They only knew the narrative Rachel had spun. A hard-working cop versus an elitist bureaucrat. "He thought he could crush me," Rachel bragged to the table. "He thought the badge would scare me, but he forgot that out here on the street we have each other's backs." Just then, the mood in the bar shifted. It wasn't sudden, but a rippling silence that started near the door and spread inward. Phones were lighting up. People were whispering, looking at their screens, and then looking at Rachel with expressions that ranged from confusion to disgust. "What?" Rachel asked, looking around. "What's going on?" The bartender, an ex-cop named Hank, who had known Rachel for years, reached up and grabbed the remote. He turned the volume up on the TV. The news anchor, who had been sympathetic just hours ago, now looked grim. Breaking news in the Rachel Bennett case. We have just received leaked audio recordings from the internal cabin of the police cruiser released moments ago by the Department of Justice. Warning: the language you are about to hear is graphic and disturbing. Rachel's stomach dropped. Internal cabin, but the Dashcam doesn't record inside audio. Then she heard it, her own voice booming through the bar speakers, amplified for everyone to hear. "You saw what I told you. You saw. We are the blue line. We don't rat." The bar was dead silent, but it was the next part that sealed her fate, the part where she mocked Derrick's name, where she called him a thug in a suit, and where she laughed about twisting his arm. "Did you hear that pop, Kyle? Like a chicken wing?" Rachel stared at the screen, her mouth open. She looked around the room for support, but nobody met her eyes. The officer who had bought her a drink moments ago was now staring at his phone, hurriedly deleting a tweet he had posted in her defense. Hank, the bartender, walked over to her table. He didn't shout. He just picked up her half-finished drink and dumped it into the sink. "You need to leave, Rach," Hank said quietly. "Hank, that's taken out of context," she stammered, standing up. "You tried to frame a guy, Rach, and you tried to make a rookie lie for you," Hank said, his voice hard. "We cover for mistakes. We don't cover for that. Get out." Rachel stumbled out of the bar into the cool night air. Her phone was blowing up, but not with support. The notifications were a torrent of hate, death threats, and demands for her imprisonment. The GoFundMe page had been suspended for violating terms of service. She ran to her car, her hands shaking so badly she dropped her keys. As she bent to pick them up, blinding white lights flooded the parking lot. A siren chirped. "Whoop! Whoop!" Rachel squinted into the glare. 3 black SUVs had boxed her in. This wasn't a standard patrol stop. These were federal vehicles. Doors opened. 6 agents in tactical vests poured out, weapons drawn but pointed low. Leading them was Agent Nathan Brooks. And standing behind him, illuminated by the harsh streetlights, was Derrick Coleman. Derrick wasn't wearing a suit today. He was wearing a windbreaker with the Department of Justice seal. His jaw was still bandaged, but his eyes were clear. "Rachel Bennett!" Brooks shouted. "Step away from the vehicle! Show me your hands!" Rachel froze. The irony hit her like a physical blow. She was standing in a parking lot, blinded by lights, being ordered to show her hands. "I'm a police officer," she screamed, her voice cracking. "Not anymore," Brooks replied. "You are under arrest for deprivation of rights under color of law, obstruction of justice, witness tampering, and assault causing bodily injury. Turn around." Rachel complied slowly. She felt the cold steel of the handcuffs click onto her wrists. They weren't the loose, comfortable fit she gave to her friends. They were tight. As Brooks marched her past the lead SUV, Rachel locked eyes with Derrick. She expected him to gloat. She expected him to smile or shout at her. Derrick did neither. He just watched her, his expression filled with a profound, exhausting sadness. He looked at her not as an enemy, but as a waste of a career, a waste of authority, a waste of a human being. "You have the right to remain silent," Derrick said softly, reciting the words she had failed to say to him. "I suggest you use it." They shoved her into the back of the SUV. The door slammed shut, sealing her in darkness. As the convoy pulled away, Rachel Bennett looked out the window at the city she used to patrol, realizing she was now just another suspect in the system she thought she owned. The trial of Rachel Bennett was dubbed the Blue Reckoning by the press. It took place in the federal courthouse in downtown Houston. The winter wind whipped against the glass building, but the heat inside the courtroom was stifling. The prosecution didn't just want a conviction. They wanted an example. Derrick Coleman had recused himself from the direct prosecution to avoid a conflict of interest, but his presence loomed large. He sat in the front row every day, notebook in hand, watching the proceedings with hawk-like intensity. Rachel's defense team was expensive, paid for by a liquidation of her assets and a second mortgage on her parents' home. Her lead attorney, Marcus Thorne, was a shark known for getting cops off the hook. His strategy was simple: attack Derrick's character, attack Kyle Patterson's credibility, and claim the audio recording was illegal wiretapping, a motion the judge had already denied, but Thorne kept bringing it up to the jury. The turning point came when Kyle Patterson took the stand. Kyle looked different. He was thinner, older. He was no longer a cop. He had resigned the day after the arrest and was now working as a security guard at a mall, but he held his head high. "Mr. Patterson," the prosecutor began, "why did you initially agree to Officer Bennett's request to lie about the incident?" "Because I was afraid," Kyle said into the microphone, his voice steady. "In the force, there is a culture. You don't speak against another officer. If you do, you're a rat. You're alone. Rachel told me that if I told the truth, my life would be over." "And why are you telling the truth now?" Kyle looked over at Derrick in the gallery. Then he looked at Rachel, who was glaring at him with pure hatred. "Because I have a daughter now," Kyle said, "and I realize that if I want to teach her to be good, I can't be a coward. Officer Bennett hit Mr. Coleman because she wanted to hurt him, because she hated that he wasn't afraid of her. There was no gun. There was no threat. Just ego." The defense attorney tried to shred Kyle on cross-examination. "Mr. Patterson, isn't it true you struck a deal with the prosecution to avoid jail time yourself? Isn't this testimony just the price of your freedom?" "I have immunity, yes," Kyle admitted. "But the price wasn't my freedom. The price was my career. I loved being a cop. I wanted to help people. Rachel Bennett took that away from me." The jury took notes furiously, but the final nail in the coffin wasn't Kyle. It was Rachel herself. Against the advice of her lawyer, Rachel insisted on taking the stand. She believed she could charm the jury. She believed she could explain the context. It was a disaster. The federal prosecutor, a sharp woman named Olivia Grant, tore her apart. "Miss Bennett," Olivia said, pacing in front of the witness box, "you stated in your police report that Mr. Coleman was combative. Can you define combative?" "He was mouthing off," Rachel snapped. "He was arrogant." "Is arrogance a crime?" "It is when you're disobeying a lawful order." "And what was the lawful order?" Olivia asked. "To step out of the car?" "He did." "To put his hands on the hood?" "He did." "At what point did he disobey?" "He looked at me," Rachel yelled, losing her cool. "He looked at me like I was dirt. You weren't there. You don't know what it's like to have these people look down on you." The courtroom went silent. "These people," Olivia asked quietly. Rachel froze. She realized she had slipped. Criminals, Rachel corrected quickly, sweat beading on her forehead. I meant criminals. Mr. Coleman had no criminal record. He was wearing a suit. He was driving the speed limit. What made you categorize him as a criminal before you even ran his plates? Rachel stammered. She looked at the jury. They weren't buying it. She looked at her lawyer. He had his face in his hands. I used my instinct, Rachel whispered. Your instinct, Olivia repeated. Let's listen to your instinct one more time. She played the audio clip again. Arrogant prick. Bet he stole that car. No further questions. The closing arguments were brutal. The defense tried to paint Rachel as a stressed public servant making a split-second error. The prosecutor painted her as a tyrant with a badge. The jury deliberated for a short time. When they returned, the courtroom was packed. Derrick sat perfectly still. Rachel stood, her hands trembling. We, the jury, the foreman read, find the defendant, Rachel Bennett, guilty on all counts. Rachel let out a sob. Her knees gave way, and her lawyer had to hold her up. The judge, a stern man named Thomas Whitaker, looked over his glasses at her. Miss Bennett, you betrayed the public trust in a way that is repugnant to the Constitution. You didn't just break a man's jaw, you broke the faith of the community. Sentencing is set for soon. Until then, bail is revoked. Remand the defendant. The bailiff moved in. This time there was no gentle treatment. He pulled Rachel's arms behind her back, cuffing her with practiced efficiency. As she was led out of the side door toward the holding cells, she looked back one last time. She was searching for someone, anyone, to give her a sympathetic look. Her parents were crying, but they looked ashamed. Her lawyer was packing his briefcase. Her eyes landed on Derrick Coleman. Derrick stood up. He nodded once, a gesture of finality. It wasn't forgiveness. It was closure. Rachel Bennett disappeared behind the heavy steel door, the click of the lock echoing through the silent courtroom. The power she had abused had finally turned around and crushed her. The day of sentencing arrived with the heaviness of a funeral. The courtroom was packed, not just with reporters, but with community leaders, activists, and officers who were watching to see which way the wind would blow. Rachel stood before Judge Whitaker. She looked smaller now, her confidence completely eroded by time in county lockup. She wore an orange jumpsuit, the bright color washing out her pale complexion. The handcuffs were chained to her waist. Rachel Bennett, Judge Whitaker began, his voice echoing in the silent room. You have been found guilty of crimes that strike at the very foundation of our society. A badge is a symbol of trust, not a license to bully. When you struck Mr. Coleman, you didn't just break a jaw, you attempted to break the spirit of the law itself. The judge paused, shuffling his papers. Rachel held her breath. Her defense attorney had asked for probation. The prosecution had asked for a long sentence. It is the judgment of this court, Whitaker continued, that you be sentenced to a term of 15 years in a federal correctional institution, without the possibility of parole for the first 12 years. A gasp went through the room. 15 years. It was a life sentence for a career. Furthermore, the judge added, looking over his spectacles, you are stripped of your pension, and you are permanently barred from holding any position in law enforcement or security in the United States. Rachel's knees buckled. She didn't scream this time. She just slumped, the air leaving her body as if she had been punched in the gut. 15 years. She would be in her 50s when she got out. Her youth, her authority, her life gone. As the marshals led her away, she didn't look back. There was no one left to look at. Later, the Federal Correctional Institution in Beaumont, Texas, was a far cry from the streets of Houston. It was hot, humid, and loud. Rachel Bennett was no longer Officer Bennett. She was inmate number 49121. She sat in the cafeteria staring at a tray of gray mystery meat. She sat alone. In prison, ex-cops were the lowest of the low. They had to be housed in protective custody wings. But even there, the isolation was brutal. She spent 23 hours a day in a small cell staring at a concrete wall. There was no blue wall here. There was no union rep. There was just the crushing reality of her own actions. One afternoon, a guard approached her table. Bennett, you got mail. Rachel perked up. She hadn't received a letter in months. Her friends had abandoned her. Her parents were too ashamed to write often. She tore open the envelope. It wasn't a letter. It was a newspaper clipping. The headline read, The Coleman Act passes Senate. New era of police accountability begins. Below the headline was a picture of Derrick Coleman shaking hands with the president. He looked strong, his jaw fully healed. The article detailed how the Bennett case had become the catalyst for sweeping federal legislation, mandatory body cams that couldn't be turned off, independent prosecutors for police misconduct, the end of qualified immunity for acts of malice. Rachel stared at the photo. She had tried to destroy him. She had tried to put him in his place. Instead, she had made him the most powerful man in law enforcement reform history. Her hate had fueled his rise. She crumbled the paper in her fist, tears of bitter regret streaming down her face. She wasn't just a prisoner. She was a footnote in someone else's hero story. Later still, in the Southwest District of Houston, Derrick Coleman stood on the sidewalk where it had all happened, Interstate 10. The traffic rushed by, oblivious to history. A car pulled up. It was a modest sedan. Kyle Patterson stepped out. He was wearing a security guard uniform, but he looked healthier, lighter. In the back seat, a baby seat faced backward. "Mr. Director," Kyle said, extending his hand. "Just Derrick, Kyle," Derrick corrected, shaking it firmly. "How is she?" "She's beautiful," Kyle smiled, looking back at his daughter. "Sleeping." "I have something for you," Derrick said. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. Kyle looked weary. "What is this?" "It's a letter of recommendation," Derrick said. "For the Fire Academy. I made some calls. They know what you did. They know you stood up when it counted. You might not be a cop anymore, Kyle. But this city still needs people who want to save lives." Kyle took the envelope, his eyes widening. Being a firefighter had been his childhood dream, even before the police academy. "I don't know what to say," Kyle stammered. "Don't say anything," Derrick said, turning to look at the highway. "Just be the father your daughter deserves, and teach her that doing the right thing costs something, but it buys you everything." Derrick walked back to his car, the same charcoal gray Volvo. He got in, checked his mirrors, and pulled out onto the road. He drove exactly at the speed limit, heading home to his family. Justice hadn't just been served, it had been built. And miles away, in a concrete cell, Rachel Bennett sat in the dark, listening to the sound of keys turning in locks, realizing that the silence she was left with was the loudest sound she had ever heard. And that's the story of how one moment of arrogance destroyed a life and changed a nation. It's a brutal reminder that the badge is a heavy weight to carry, and those who abuse it will eventually find themselves crushed by it. Rachel thought she was untouchable, protected by a system designed to shield her. She forgot that karma doesn't care about your uniform, and justice, true justice, has a way of finding you when you least expect it. She lost everything not because of Derrick, but because of her own hate. What do you think? Did Rachel deserve 15 years, or was the system too harsh on her? And would you have had the courage to do what Kyle Patterson did? Let me know your verdict in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you never miss another story of karma hitting back. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. As I sit here reflecting on what happened that day on Interstate 10, my heart still feels heavy with the weight of it all. I watched a single moment of unchecked anger and deep-seated prejudice unravel an entire life. Rachel Bennett stepped out of her cruiser believing her badge made her untouchable, that her hatred gave her permission to strike, to humiliate, to break a man who had done nothing wrong except exist calmly in front of her. She thought the blue wall would always shield her, that fear and loyalty would silence anyone who dared speak the truth. But she was wrong. That one open-handed slap didn't just bruise Derrick Coleman's jaw, it cracked open something much bigger. It exposed the rot hiding behind "just doing my job," the quiet complicity that lets injustice breathe, and the courage it actually takes to stand against it. Kyle Patterson, a young father terrified of losing everything, chose the harder path. He chose truth over brotherhood, even when it cost him his career, his sense of safety, his future as he knew it. And Derrick? He didn't scream for revenge. He carried his pain with dignity and turned it into change, legislation, accountability, a legacy that will protect others long after he's gone. The real lesson cuts deep. Hate doesn't just destroy the person you aim it at, it poisons you from the inside until there's nothing left but regret and concrete walls. Power without humility is a loaded gun you eventually turn on yourself. And real justice? It doesn't always roar. It whispers through one honest voice, one recorded word, one man who refuses to stay silent. Life will test every one of us with moments like that. When staying quiet feels easier, when anger feels righteous, when fear tells us to look away. The question is, what will we choose when no one's watching? What about you? Have you ever had to decide between loyalty and what's right? Would you have found the strength Kyle did? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and your stories matter. If this hit you in the chest the way it still does me, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe with notifications on. You never know when the next story of real karma and redemption is coming. Thanks for being here with me. I'll see you in the next one.